everyone, it's Linda Canase with LyndaCreates, and I have a really fun Stitcher stamp project for Halloween this week. And this has several different techniques in there that I want to share with you. First off, I want to show that I am using the, Snarky Cat Halloween stamp by Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous. And there are a lot of cute pieces in there. So this is the cat that I stitched. And let me explain the pink hands. I've had a really serious allergic reaction to something and it has affected my hands. So I apologize if you see these bright pink hands coming through and stitching. I just wanted to share a project and had to use these gloves. So let me go ahead. Please bear with me. Ignore the pink hands. So this is the cat that I did and the pumpkin and the spider web. There's several steps. I used alcohol inks to add some of the shading on the fabrics, and then I stitched it and pretty much followed the stitching on the stamps as a guide. You can see anything and a little variation. So check out how I made this. I first stamped the design that I want onto a piece of scratch paper, just blank paper, and I cut out some scrap fabric that I want, and it's a very fine weave, it's a cotton. So I'm trying something different. I want to add some color, but a little more controlled. So I have a piece of, can you see that, scrap acetate, and that is only to protect the fabric and all the ink. And I'm going to lay my scrap fabric over that. So now the archival ink on the bottom won't soak through the fabric and bleed. So I will control the color that will go on there. What I'm going to do is add some orange alcohol ink, and I have butterscotch and sunset orange. Primarily it's going to be sunset orange, but I want a little bit of butterscotch in there just to add some dimension. So I have my palette, just a plastic palette, and I'm just going to put, kind of see the colors I'm going for. And I don't need a lot, so I'm just doing one drop each. And I have some alcohol blending solution. It's kind of cool what's happening there. And the main thing that I'm trying to do is apply the color to just where the pumpkin's going to be. I'm dampening my brush. And I'm going to be cutting this out so it doesn't have to, I don't have to worry about it being so exact. And this is pretty much similar to how if you were inking this, you were coloring it in with the marker, you would want to add shadows. I think I'm going to stop there, maybe a little bit more. And again, you see how it's bleeding all outside of that edge. That is okay. Again, we're going to cut this out. So that is the technique. That's why you have the acetate as well. And I'm just going to let that completely dry. I'm going to stamp over it and then I'll cut it out. So you can see where the pumpkin is going to be, and it has its shadows and highlights. And I'm just going to cut it out around the edges. And the reason I did this on a separate piece of fabric is because you can see how it bled around, and if I had done it on the finished fabric, it would have gone everywhere. So I was trying to be a little cautious on that. So before I stamp the cat, because I want the tail to be here in a different position, as you can see, I put a piece of washi tape over his tail, and I'm going to ink it up now and then remove the tape so that the tail does not get printed. Again, I will lay the acetate and the fabric over this and stamp the cat. So there's the cat. I'm going to stamp the tail. Okay, so that's it for the stamping part. I'll do the spider web on the fabric when I'm ready, but the cat, let me do a little work on this cat, and I could do it on here. The thing about archival ink is that it does bleed when you add the alcohol blending solution. So I'm going to kind of test this. Now the outer parts that are darker are going to stay black, but I want his belly to be slightly colored. So I'm taking, let me do it over here, a little bit of alcohol ink on it. And I'm just going to see what happens when I do this. Interestingly, the ink isn't bleeding to the center, it's bleeding outwards. So this was an interesting test. I wouldn't say it's the most successful. Okay, so here's what we'll do. I also have some pitch black alcohol ink. Thing about dark colors like this, you do not want to put too much. Okay, and I know that looks really funny right now, but we're going to work on this. We have the pumpkin looking pretty good. We are going to apply some Wonder Under to it. And Wonder Under is think of it sort of like double stick tape for fabric. And you don't want to have a lot of extra because, like double stick tape, it'll get in the way. So you just want to size like what you're going to cut out. And it comes with the backing paper, so I will get that. So if anyone doesn't know what Wonder Under is, it's made by a company called Pellon. This is a very, very old Wonder Under. The newer one doesn't have this kind of instructions, but it is this fusible web, which you can see here. And it has this backing paper. So what you would do is cut out a piece that you need. You would have this fusible web paper on the back side of it, and you would take that and you would iron it together, and it would transfer the like again double stick tape, it would transfer the fusible web to your fabric. And once your fabric has that, you would peel this part away, the paper part away, and it now becomes, it's dry. It's just like a backing on the fabric. But when you take this again, whether you die cut it, paper cut, scissor cut it, whatever you want to do, when you take it and you iron it onto your finished fabric, it now will stick like an applique or just like double stick tape. That shape will stick down. So you want to apply the Wonder Under to your piece before you cut it out. So I'm going to go iron it down with my backing paper, and I'll be right back. So I ironed it down, and I can show you this is what the backing paper, it would now peel off, and you have the pellon stuck to the fabric. So, and I already did this one. So it's super thin. So now what I can do is take my fabric scissors and cut this out. So there's the pumpkin. And now I'm going to trim the cat out and see how he goes. He's going to be a little harder because his fur kind of brushes outside of that, but that's okay because I'm going to embroider on top. And if you're used to the paper arts of stamping and cutting it out, this is like fussy cutting with fabric. And just to let you know, I'm going to embroider a lot of detail onto this after I attach it down to the background fabric. So I'm not being so worried about following the outline. Well, like up here, I think I'd want to do it a little bit neater. I just want to show something on the cat. You could see how, let's see. You could see how the gray around his face is a little lighter in the corner, a little darker below. Same with his belly. So when I stitch, I'll have a little bit lighter gray there. And I'm not so worried about all this area that bled because I'm going to stitch, as well as the eyes. I'm going to fill in the eyes. So it'll turn out perfectly fine. So the only other thing I have to cut out is the tail. So I'm starting off with a 10-inch by 10-inch square of cotton fabric. It is a very fine weave, and it is beautiful because, again, you could see straight through it. So you can lay your pieces down before you iron it. So that is how I'm going to applique on the pieces. The Wonder Under is, like I said, it's like double-sided tape that is heat activated. So these pieces have the Wonder Under behind it, and when I go iron it, it will stick it down. So let me go do that. Iron this so it's adhered, and now I'm just going to add the spider web. And this, I want it coming down, and again I have my template underneath it so I know where it's going, and I want it to look like the spider is coming down onto his tail. So there it is, and now I can stitch on it. Let me bring it in a little closer so you can see it. So I have the color and it's clean. Here again I'm going to stitch over most of it so you won't see the bleed on the sides, and I will also add extra fur on the edges. So it takes a few extra steps, but you get this really clean look, and you don't have to add a whole bunch of stitching in the middle here to add color. So I'll show you what I mean. Now I'm keeping my drawing nearby for reference, but I have this ready to go. I have floss that I'm going to use. Get set up a little bit more and I'll be right back. So I'm starting with the lightest orange color that I have. It's 722, DMC 722. And I am going to, because it's the lightest color, I'm going to start in a light area. And what I'm going to do is start out here. So it comes down, and if you think about the floss going behind here, what I'm doing is I am basically from behind holding this in place without tying a knot. So I use the smallest needle that I can, because this fabric, it is much more fine. It will leave a hole. So because the stamp itself has these lines on it, I'm just taking my floss and following the shading lines. Now later on I could do more if I want, but I'm just following these lines. And let me show you, let me get this in there. Let me show you the back side, because like I said, I have the tail here. So the goal is, let me bring it in. You can see I'm catching the tail underneath my stitches. So it's basically holding it in place without having a knot. And the reason you don't want a knot is because sometimes you catch it with your needle and it gets really hard to stitch. So it's just kind of a cleaner way of doing this. So when you do your initial tail, I guess that's what I call this when you start it. When you do the tail, you want it to come from across where you're going to stitch. You could anticipate where you're going to stitch over. And your stitches will just cover that over and hold it in place. And I'm just going behind these, and any place where I think it would be a highlighted orange, I'm just stitching. And now what you could do when you come to the end, just visually look at where you're going to stitch over. And once you find a spot that there's going to be a lot of stitching, you can just come up in a different area so you don't have to tie a knot. I'm going to come up similar to where I ended over or started over here. And just cut that off, and I'm just going to shorten that a little bit. And actually, at least where I started, I can cut that off. I'm using 3 strands, so that's the lightest orange. Now I'm going to go to, okay, I'm starting with the medium, 3 strands of a medium orange, which is DMC 720. I decided just in this area along the side here, right along here, there is a long vertical stripe and a short little horizontal. So I'm going to do the long vertical stripe in the darker orange, which is DMC 920. And I'm just going to do it as 2 stitches. I'm coming up, not in the same area that I went down, but a little bit further down. And then I'm coming over here. And I'll show you why I'm doing it. And then this color is going to continue on the bottom part here. Before I go too far with this color, I'm going to stop a moment, and I'm going to come back with the other orange color. So this is from here. I'm back onto the medium orange, and I'm coming up across here, and I'm going to go along the vertical part there, and I'm parking the darker orange off to the side. The reason I went in and brought that darker orange in is because I'm going to do kind of a stitch across it to create a crosshatch look, which is what this type of shading is called. So I'm just going to duplicate it with stitching. And I'm taking this medium orange down about halfway down the height of the pumpkin, because that's where the shadow would start, or it would get a little darker with the next darker color. Just as you would think of coloring it in with markers, you want to think of it as coloring it in with embroidery floss. So I finished stitching all of the lines that were in the stamped art of the pumpkin, but I want to do more shading because I did it all in the darker colors. So I go back in either with the medium orange or the light orange to make it blend in a little bit better. So I've stitched in this area and add a little shading of the medium orange. And I'm going along here, and I can either go down the side here or come along the top and come down here. But the whole thing is that I wanted to blend in with the inked part, so that the inked part is kind of the highlight of the whole piece. Now, just to let you know, if you wanted to, you can stitch in the whole pumpkin. You could just stamp it onto the background fabric and do exactly what I'm doing, but fill in this whole area with stitches if you want to. I just chose to do the alcohol inks here so that I don't have to stitch everything, and it's an option to you if you want to do all that stitching. If you want to just use the ink as the color, it's up to you. It's a nice option for people who don't want to completely stitch it in. So to color the fabric first and then drop it in is just an easier way to do it. So I'm just going to keep stitching and doing the shading as I go. To make it blend better, I'm also coming up between the lighter colored stitches. You could see that, so that it blends in. There's no strong line between it. And you want to vary the stitches long and short, which is a nice way to do the shading, and it is something very, very similar to shading with markers, that you gradually brush it together. And I just want to say, this is very, very meditative. I've done the shading that I wanted to do, but the thing with when you do shading, you should always have some of the darkest areas. So I'm going to come back in with DMC 918, which is a darker brown. I don't want to use a lot of it, but I want to make sure that the edges get nice and dark down here. It is really, really subtle at this stage. It will make a difference. And the thing too down here, what would really help is down here at the bottom, there's on the stamped image there was a lot of gaps, but the ink was the shading in it. So I'm going to use this dark brown to fill in the gaps down here. Just want to give it dimension. So I finished stitching the pumpkin. I'm going to stop there. And I started working on the cat's fur, and I have the tail. And I just randomly did make it look like it's startled, sticking out. And then on the feet, the bottom 2 feet, I just did a satin stitch, so it's more smooth. And then I'm going to follow the drawn lines like I did on the pumpkin. I'm going to fill in the drawn lines like I did there with the black. Actually, it's a very dark gray DMC 3799. I'm going to fill in the fur with that color. So I finished stitching the cat in the dark gray-black color, and I used 3 strands of that color to do those lines. So now I'm going to go in with DMC 452, which is this lighter gray, and I'm going to use 2 strands, and I'm going to shade in a little bit so it's a little softer looking where it changes. But you can see where the ink has worked really well to add some color on his belly and on his face. And I will go back in with some other colors to finish off his face and the spider web and the spider. So I'm just going to keep working. I apologize I couldn't show more stitching because of my hands, but I just wanted to share that I thought the technique of combining the alcohol ink and the applique fabric together with the stitching was a lot of fun, and it gives you a way to fill in areas quickly without having to stitch it completely. And then I used the silver Kreinik Metallics Balget cable, so it was thin enough and shiny enough to use for the spider web. Had a lot of fun with that. So let me just show you real quick, and I hope you enjoyed this and try it yourself. It's really simple and it's very easy and a lot of fun. So thank you so much for watching. Please be sure and check out my website, LyndaCreates. That's Lynda with the Y, L-Y-N-D-A, LyndaCreates.com for more inspiration. And I am having so much fun with my Stitch Your Stamps so that you have these easily accessible images and just some simple embroidery. This was using 2 stitches, so it was really simple, and I appreciate everyone watching. Thank you so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!